Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Individual Investor. For some people, buying the first home is one of the most important financial decisions of their lives. And more often than not, people actually rush into buying their first home because of peer or social pressure, or just because they're paying rent and they feel that by paying rent, they are wasting money versus putting that money into something that they own. My goal in this video is to give you the tools to evaluate if buying a property to live in makes sense or not. Since I live in the UK, we're going to be looking at buying a property in London as an example. However, the tools and concepts that we're going to learn today can be applied to your particular area, city, or country. All right, let's start first by gathering the data that we need for our analysis. Okay, the first one of the list, you're gonna obviously need to know the price of the target property or of the home that you want to buy or apartment. Then secondly, we're gonna need a mortgage calculator to understand all the mortgage payments, the interest rate on the mortgage, the total interest that we're gonna be paying, and the periods and all of that. We're gonna also need the upfront expenses, so the money that you're gonna need upfront to buy the property. This is not only the down payment, but also things like the stamp duty tax if you're in the UK, or things like the property tax, depending on your country, and any other fees associated with that. We're also gonna need the yearly property price increase, so basically the price appreciation that we expect or estimate for our property year over year. We're also going to need the yearly average inflation, and you're going to see why when we start doing the analysis. And finally, we're going to need to understand the opportunity costs, which are basically the opportunity that we are, or the costs, the benefit that we're missing out by taking some money and buying a property versus investing that money somewhere else. So going back to property price, fairly obvious. What's the price of the home or apartment that you want to buy, period. Now, in some cases, people are not sure because they haven't found the house or apartment that they want to buy. So if you're not sure, you can simply use the 3x rule, which is a general rule that people should follow. It's pretty sound advice. Your target property should not be more than 3 times your annual household income. So next one, the mortgage calculator. This one actually is pretty easy. There are many mortgage calculators online, and you can even go to your own bank website, and I'm pretty sure you'll find a mortgage calculator through your own bank. Now, alternatively, you can use my Google Sheet. So next, we have the upfront expenses. This is the money that you have to put down upfront before doing anything else, and you will obviously have kind of the down payment for the property is kind of a form of upfront expense. So you have the down payment, but on top of that, you're gonna have things like the stamp duty tax, which that one applies in the UK and is 5% of the price of the property. And depending on the country, you might have a property tax, or maybe like 2 types of taxes, like a state or federal tax. There's also things like fees, like the valuation fees, survey fees, etc. So if you're not sure, you can Google them and see for your country, city, or area what the breakdown of the upfront expenses are. But it is important that you understand and you know this, because they play an important factor in the whole equation here. Okay, next is the yearly property price percentage change. Okay, and this one is actually not as hard as it seems. You only have to find the housing price index or something similar for your particular city or region. All right, so you can actually get this figure online by looking at some databases. If you are in the UK, you can go to the Office of National Statistics, ons.gov.uk, and get the housing price index from that website. And that's where I got the housing price index for London, and that's what I'm using in my calculation. If you're in the US, you can use the FRED website, or the Federal Reserve of Economic Data, and you'll be able to find similar indices there. Okay, but I'm pretty sure that depending on your country, there's going to be some Office of National Statistics that can provide you this data, and you can use this to see actually the prices, the historical prices of properties in your particular city, and then find the particular rate over the last 15 and 20 years, and then make a projection based on that. Next, we have the yearly average inflation. All right, and this one, just like the housing price index, you can rely on statistics data. And for this one, we can use the consumer price index, which is a fairly standard way of measuring inflation in many parts of the world. And so yeah, you can use the CPI or consumer price index. And similarly, in the UK, you can go to the same website, the Office of National Statistics, ons.gov.uk, and find the CPI. And for the US, you have the Bureau of Labor Statistics, bls.gov, and you'll be able to find the consumer price index there. And last but not least, we have the opportunity costs. The opportunity costs is nothing more than just answering the question, what would you do with the money instead? And by money, I mean the down payment that you have to put in advance to buy the property, and also all the upfront expenses. So if we take the down payment and all the upfront expenses, and we grab that money and we put it in something like an index fund, something that tracks the S&P 500, for example, then we know that over the course of 20, 25, 30 years, we can expect an average return on that investment of roughly 8% or 9%, right? And with that, enough of the theory. Let's actually look at the spreadsheet right now and do some calculations ourselves. But first, if you guys are enjoying this video so far, I would really appreciate if you can give me a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thank you very much. I appreciate your support. And with that, let's now look at this Google Sheet. And again, I'm sharing the link with you in the description below. Just make sure that you make a copy before you start playing with the numbers here. So like I said, pretty much you have to just fill out some of the cells here, and the calculation will be done for you. I'm using, again, I'm in the UK, so I'm using pounds as the base currency. So let me explain what we have here. The first thing that we need is here the time horizon in years, basically the mortgage term. Okay, like I said before, typically you would look at a mortgage of 25 years, but if you have a precise figure in mind, because you know already what you can afford and everything, then just go for your particular number of years here. But I'm gonna go with 25. Then we have the interest rate of the mortgage. And again, if you use your mortgage calculator online from your bank or any other website, it will tell you roughly based on your financials what mortgage they can offer you, okay, and what interest rate. So just use that interest rate here, whatever they give you. And in some cases, it's not going to be like a fixed interest rate for 25 years. Typically, they give you a deal where it is a particular rate for maybe 2 or 5 years, and then it changes, right? Or sometimes it's fixed for longer periods of time, but it is higher. So you're gonna have to have that in mind. But just for purposes of this example, I'm gonna just throw in here 3% as a rate. And as you can see, here some of the numbers are already starting to populate. Another data point that we need here for our calculation, especially if you're doing a kind of an analysis between buying and renting, we need actually your existing monthly rate so that we can compare actually how much you would have paid in rent over time versus versus if you were actually contributing to your mortgage payments instead. So let's assume a monthly rent today of £1,500 in London. Okay. And then the property price here. So assuming that you know your property price, I'm gonna assume that I know that my property, my dream home is £400,000. All right, and the down payment, so basically how much you will have to pay to put down for your mortgage. Typically this number is between 10 and 20%. Here in the UK, it's fairly standard to go with 20%. Some people go with 15, 10, or even lower, but typically you want to go with 20% to get a better mortgage or better interest rate. So I'm going to go with 20%. And then before moving on, you saw that, you know, when populating the years, the interest rate, and the property price, everything else was computed. Now, what's happening in the background here, I'm using a modified version of the official Google Sheet mortgage spreadsheet. If you Google Google Sheet mortgage spreadsheet, you will find a similar version of this that Google has documented. And basically here, you can modify this as you want, but this is where I'm grabbing all the numbers from. Okay, from this spreadsheet here, I'm grabbing the interest, the monthly payments, the interest paid, and also I have here, I added some sections for the upfront expenses, okay, that we're gonna see as well. So let's keep going here down the list. Okay, so this one, the average yearly increase of the cost of the property. So I'm assuming here 4% per year. Okay, and again, this is just an estimation based on historical data. And you know, if you know anything about historical data, is that not necessarily because something happened will happen in the future, right? Especially with things like house prices, etc. However, there is an overall trend of prices just going up, and although there are bubbles and sometimes market conditions that really bring prices down, overall over the long term you can expect your property price to appreciate in London at least. So what I did here was, like I said before, if you go to your particular database of the Office of the National Statistics for your area or country, just get the price index, and here I extracted all the data from, I think I have here, the original source, okay, as of March 2020. So it's not super recent, but still, it's still fairly recent. So I downloaded this, and then here I basically calculated, I think I calculated the increase based on the last 15 years roughly, okay, which we have here. So I calculated all the yearly averages and then the increase per year, okay. And again, this is a very rough estimation, but what you can see here is that the average yearly increase is, at least for the last 15 years, is roughly 6.49% on average per year. And I think I did 4%, 4% just to be more conservative, right? But let me just do 6%. Okay, but at least you can get a good idea of what will happen with the price year over year over the long term. All right. So next one is the famous maintenance costs that some people overlook, and you know, it is very hard to estimate actually how much you're going to spend per year on maintenance. On average, right, people operate with a 1% rule, which means that you can assume that every year you will spend on maintenance 1% of the property price. Okay, so we're going with that rule to keep things simple. Otherwise, it's too hard to guess. Okay, and lastly here we have the inflation rate, and for the inflation we have the UK inflation, the consumer price index, and similarly this is the CPI index over the last, I think, 10 years, 11 years. Okay, so similar exercise as we did with the housing price index. I calculated the yearly averages, and then here the average of those averages is roughly 2%. Okay, so we're going with a 2% yearly inflation, although now in 2022 inflation has been through the roof. So maybe we can crank that up to 3%. We don't know, but at least we can assume that over the long term, a 2% per year is reasonable, depending, of course, on what happens this year and the following ones. And then here we have a bunch of calculations that are happening in the background. Okay, and I don't want to spend the whole video explaining what's going on here, but basically here we're doing the future value calculations. So future value, or FV, in the context of this exercise is exactly the same formula that you're probably used to, where FV, or future value, equals to the present value times 1 plus the rate to the power of n. But in the context of this exercise, we're going to be calculating the property price in the future, or the kind of the other expenses or costs in the future. So in this context, we have that the rate of return will be either the inflation or the growth or price appreciation of the property. And n, the number of periods, in this case will be the number of years that we are using in our analysis, which in this case will be exactly the same number of years for the mortgage. The present value, or PV, which is the actually, once you have the future value, that's how you can come back to the original present value. And the formula is you basically solve for FV, so you end up with present value equals to future value divided by the 1 plus the rate to the power of n, where FV equals future value, the rate will be the same, either inflation or the price growth, depending on what we are calculating, and then n will be the number of periods, which is the number of years in this case. Okay. So having said that, let's come back to our Google Sheet here. Here I'm doing all these calculations on your behalf. So we're calculating certain future values in this case. So we're calculating the future value of the maintenance spend. So what's happening here, if you look at the formula, basically I'm taking the 1% maintenance, right, and projecting that over the course of 25 years and adjusting for inflation. So we know that after 25 years, in this case, we're going to spend roughly $164,000 in maintenance. The future value of the property, similar calculation. We take the property price and then we calculate the future value based on the 25 years of the mortgage and a 6% price appreciation year over year. Right. And here we have the future value of the capital gains from the property. So basically this will be the future value of the property minus what we paid for the property. So basically the capital gains, again, the money we made if we sell the property after 25 years. And basically we're going to be left with roughly 1.3 million pounds in this case. Okay, so those are all the future value calculations. And then here we have the interest paid on property. Okay, so basically if we take out the mortgage and we're going to have to pay that interest over time, that again, we're using 3% here, and we're taking this from this the mortgage calculator, which is here. I think I have it. Yeah, here, the total interest paid. Okay. And then next we have the upfront expenses. Okay, £24,000 in this case. Okay, and here, let me go to the next tab. Here's where I'm showing the breakdown here. So we have the stamp duty tax, which is 5% in the UK, and then there's some standard fees, the mortgage fees, valuation, survey costs, etc. Depending on your condition and your region, you will, this might vary. And please ignore this stuff over here. That's just for, I think I didn't use those figures, but yeah, just I'm only using the upfront expenses here. And Then we have that. So we have the down payment. We have the total initial capital. So basically, again these upfront expenses, the down payment plus the upfront expenses, right? How much money we need upfront. So we're gonna need £104,000. And then here's where we calculate the opportunity costs. So we're assuming a stock market like opportunity cost equal to the general stock market return, so 8%. So the opportunity cost will be £717,000. So basically, if I take these £104,000 and I don't buy a property with this, but I instead invest them at 8% per year, then after 25 years, I will have £717,000. So that's my opportunity cost. Okay, if I don't invest that money in this, like an index fund, then I'm missing out on this. So that's opportunity cost. All right, and here we're getting to the meat of the analysis here, the present value. So the present value is where we take all these projections of what everything costs 25 years from now. We'll bring everything to the present so we can actually compare apples to apples to really understand clearly what the associated costs are. Okay, so in this case, the present cost of buying will be actually the opportunity cost plus the maintenance cost plus the interest and the inflation adjusted. So in this case, if we double click here, we see that we're simply doing the math here. We're taking the opportunity cost, okay, and adding the interest paid on the property plus the maintenance spend. All right, and then we are adjusting for inflation. Okay, we're adjusting for inflation, so we're left with £899,000. Okay, so that's the cost of buying. If we were to buy, that's the cost of buying today. Okay. Now the present value cost of renting. Okay, so if we were to basically if we don't buy anything and we just pay rent for 25 years, this is basically the result. Okay, so we take the rent today, right, and we multiply that by the 25. So we multiply that by 12, then by 25, and we have the yearly rent, and then we have to adjust that by inflation as well. Now, obviously, when landlords raise the rent, they never do it by 2% every year. Sometimes it doesn't go up in 1 year, but then the next year it goes up by 10%, or sometimes the amount is different. So it's hard to estimate, but if you just take into consideration standard inflation, you can make a decent projection there. So we have that, okay, present value cost of buying, the present value cost of renting, and then we have the capital gains from the property. So this is actually the gains that you make if you were to sell the property. Okay, so you get £800,000, assuming this very ambitious 6% yearly increase. Okay, which is again fairly ambitious. We can try something. If we try something more conservative, let me go back to 4 here. We see that the number drops dramatically. Okay, so now either way, right, we see that the net here, if we were to subtract the present value cost of buying minus the cost of renting, okay, plus the capital gains, then if we calculate that, then we are left with £240,000. Then we're left with almost £245,000. Okay, now obviously we see that and we go, yes, that's I'm £245,000 better off. Remember that if we play with the numbers here, you always, especially if house prices increase over time, and as long as you're paying in your mortgage payments, right, less than your rent, in general, you're going to be better off. Now, there are some things that you cannot put a price tag on, and that's why I wanted to do this analysis, because you can actually you have there the figure, you can quantify how much better off you are, and then compare that with the many other things that are happening in your life to see if it does make sense in your particular circumstances to buy a property. There are a bunch of qualitative benefits to renting. Some of those are that you have more flexibility. You don't have any attachments. You can, if you don't like the place, if you don't like the city, if you want to move, you simply just pack your bags and you leave, right? It takes no time. So a lot of people value that flexibility. And you don't have to deal with any major repairs. Okay, so if there's something major, like you need to do the roof again, or change the boiler, or change lift up all the floor to do an underground repair for some reason, right? You basically, if you don't own the property, like, you're off the hook. Those are not your problems. You can just simply either wait until they fix that stuff for you, or you just move out and find some other place. Also, it is very important to really consider and think about your goal. What's your end goal? As we saw in the analysis, you're going to be left, if you buy, there's going to be a net gain, right? But that net gain is only realized if you sell the property. Okay, if you're going to live there for 30, 40 years, who cares if the price goes up or down or sideways, right? Nobody cares. You only care about that if you're going to sell it, right, and do something with it. So you have to understand what your end goal is. And some people, especially the ones that want to get on the property ladder very, very soon, they do this because of a couple of reasons. But some of them are they want to buy now ASAP because they want to sell it later and use those gains to buy a bigger house. Okay, some people just do that, right? And they do that 2, 3, 4 times in their lifetime, and then they manage to get into a nicer and bigger property every single time, because they're selling and taking those capital gains to actually invest in other property, and perhaps at that point in their careers they are making more money, so it works out nicely. Some other people, on the other hand, some people might want to sell after 25 years, and then you take those capital gains, that huge amount of cash, and you go retire on a beach somewhere. Okay. And finally, are you planning on living there in the mid to long term? One rule of thumb that people use is that if you're not planning on staying there in that place for at least 7 years, then you might be better off renting, because the hassle of buying, selling is just not worth it. Plus, remember that the housing market, just like the stock market and any other market, also suffers from bubbles, from crashes, etc. So if you want to buy, if you want to sell, maybe at the time that you want to sell, the market conditions will not be the right for you. So you might be forced to wait, and sometimes it takes a couple of years for the market to recover. So you have to make that call. And if you want to leave, if you want to sell, then okay, are you gonna actually wait until the market recovers, or are you gonna be willing to sell at a loss or break even point? So that's the other thing to consider, that maybe when you want to sell, the market conditions will not be optimal, and you have to factor that into your overall decision making process. All right, guys, that's all I have for now. I want to thank you very much for joining me today and for watching this video. I hope that you really enjoyed it. Any questions, comments, feedback, please leave them in the section below. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you next time. Take care.